Welcome to More Than a Paycheck, the podcast for high achievers who feel trapped in their job but know something has to change. If your bad manager and toxic work environment have you stressed and working crazy hours, and you want an easier solution than finding a new job, you're in the right place. Let's do this. Happy New Year. Full disclosure, I don't really do goals. When I hear about setting goals, there's just a little too much angst inside of me, a lot of pressure to set time-bound goals and make them specific and measurable, and then it feels like hard work and something else I'm going to have to give a status update to. After 20 years in corporate, I'm like, goals aren't super exciting and motivating to me. At the same time, there's big things I want to do, but what I like to do is kind of focus more on small actions I'm going to take or stop taking on a daily basis, because I know those small changes consistently over time are what are actually going to help me reach my goals. So there are still big things I want to do, and I still keep that in mind, but I'm always tracking to the daily action. Am I taking the appropriate daily action? That's what I like to look at, which feels a little more exciting and motivating for me. So if you're like me and don't do goals, I would offer to you to think about what are the small actions you want to focus on and think about. If you are a big goals person, love it. My question to you is, what are you giving up to spend time on that goal? Because I know you're already maxed out. We're all using all 24 hours of the day we have. What are you choosing to reprioritize your time to stop doing or to give up or spend less time doing so that you can focus on this big goal? That's what I'd offer you to spend some good time in your head thinking about and getting clear on, because just because you decide to have a goal doesn't mean magically tomorrow there's going to be 2 more hours, or that you're going to all of a sudden feel like doing this other thing and changing some habits. So my last PSA before we jump in is, if you've been following me for a while, you know I love Beat Saber. It's so fun. I play it on the Oculus or Quest or whatever the heck it's called these days. And I'm pretty proud. One of the things I'm proud of that I accomplished in 2024 is the hard level at Beat Saber. It's not hard enough for me anymore. I'm to the expert level, and it's so fun. But I was so excited this holiday break to see that there was a new Britney Spears music pack in Beat Saber. So if you're a Beat Saber fan, I highly recommend the Britney Spears music pack. We've been having a lot of fun with it. Okay, this year I want to try something new, where I want to pick a topic each month and then dive a little bit deeper into it over the 4 weeks of that month. I may not stick with this. I might decide, no, I don't want to do this. I will also kind of throw in topics here and there as I see different issues coming up, trends, relevant topics that are going on as things continue to change in the world. But I want to help kind of focus some of the things we're talking about and really dive deeper, give you actionable things, give you kind of that next level things I'd offer to you to try if that's a topic you're struggling with. So, like I said, I may not stick with it all year, but for January, we're going with it. So if you're listening to this live as it's coming out, this month, I want to talk about toxic work environments. I want to talk about, how do you know if you're in one? How do you get out? What do you do if you can't get out? What should you start doing? What should you stop doing? How do you talk to people? Who should you talk to about it? Kind of the full 360 of toxic work environments. But before we dive into it today, I want to remind you of something important. Words matter. Words are really important. They have feeling and meaning behind them. Take a second and I'm going to say a couple words, and I want you to think about, how do they make you feel when you just hear these one words, not even in context of things? Cancer, Karen, fat, fired. Or what about the words healed, vacation, rest, Mother Earth? Words are important because they make you feel things, and how you feel impacts what you do. I've talked 220 plus episodes about this. If you're feeling scared and anxious and worried and nervous and unsafe, or calm and excited and driven and focused and motivated, who you are, what you do, totally different. How you feel impacts what you're doing, how you're showing up in the world. So it's important to pay attention to the words we're using, to the labels we're giving things, because ultimately it's going to impact who you're being in that environment. So I say that because I personally, in my own conversations, try not to use the term toxic work environment, because for me, it's very emotionally driven in a sense that makes me feel stuck and like I'm the victim and like I'm powerless and like there's nothing I can do, because it's so big and broad, and toxic feels like intense and scary and a big deal. It doesn't help me be the kind of person I want to be. It doesn't help me figure out, how do I get out of this? How do I deal with this? So I will be using that term a little bit in titles of these episodes and as we talk about this, because I know that's the common vernacular we use. But I would just offer you to think about, is that really a helpful way to label the work environment you're in, even if it is really tough? But instead of saying toxic work environment, let's say it's a tough work environment. It's harsh, it's intense, it's aggressive, it's fast, it's manipulative, it's unfair. Even just giving it a little bit more of a description, a little more succinct, a little more detailed, a little less like big and scary and overwhelming, for me, that makes it feel a little more powerful, a little more like, okay, this isn't overarching. I'm not just stuck and there's no options out. It's this one avenue that I'm not okay with. I'm going to figure something out. Okay. So again, words are important. You got to play with it, but I just offered you to check in. Does toxic work environment feel empowering? I'm not saying we want to feel good about it, but does it make you feel stuck and closed off, or does it make you feel open and like you can take some action? Let's start by defining what is a toxic work environment. There's a handful of different definitions out there. The one I like the best that kind of, I think, sums it up is it's a workplace where negative behaviors are so prevalent they become the norm. So it's bad behavior that is accepted. Okay. As I was doing a bunch of research for this, Glassdoor and Forbes both had a lot of data and articles and content around kind of what are the 5 main elements that make up a quote unquote toxic work environment. They are 1, disrespect, 2, non-inclusive, 3, unethical, 4, cutthroat, and 5, abusive. To me, as I think about toxic work environments, I define it as kind of having 2 core problems that all of these 5 attributes fit into. But where my head goes is what I would consider a not healthy work environment is one that has 1, low emotional intelligence, and 2, a lack of accountability, right? So if we go back to that definition of it's a hard, negative place to work, that's low emotional intelligence, and it becomes the norm, that's 2, a lack of accountability. Okay, so how do you spot it? How do you know, is it me? Is it them? Is it just this one leader? Am I just in a weird spot? Am I missing something? How do you know if you really are in a toxic work environment? Now, keep in mind, there are no guarantees that like you're going to find this magical environment and it's going to stay. Do your homework, ask the questions, try to find a good spot, but you also need to be aware companies are constantly changing. We reorg, leaders come and go, team dynamics shift and change, employees come and go. It's always changing. So usually if you're finding yourself in this state where you're like, is it me? Is it them? My answer is almost always yes. It's a little bit of both, right? You may have found a great environment and things shift and change, and that's okay. You just want to be aware. How are they shifting and changing? How am I shifting and changing? And is this shifting and changing in the direction I want? The other thing to keep in mind is when we're trying to figure out how to know if you're in a toxic work environment or not, what is toxic is different for everyone. Right? So if you go back to kind of those 5 traits, what's disrespectful? What's unethical? What's abusive? That's different for every single person based on their past experiences, their beliefs, their nervous system, their health, based on so many different factors. So I'm not going to dive into that today. We're going to dive into it in the coming episodes, right? But essentially you need to know what is your boundary and then how do you hold that boundary in a way that you don't get retaliated against, okay? So again, That's coming up in the next couple episodes. Make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss that. Here's a few things I would offer you to look at, or a few questions to ask as you're trying to evaluate, what is this environment? Is this a good environment? Is this the type of place I want to work? Is this the type of environment that I feel psychologically safe and set up to succeed? A couple red flags I look for. Leaders that tell you how much people like them and like working with them and how long they've worked with them in the past. They're bragging about this and bring it up multiple times. I think, again, it's fine to be like, oh yeah, I generally get along with people. I've worked with some of these people X amount of times. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But it's people that are constantly reminding you and telling you and bragging about it. So I was a senior leader on a team, and they brought in a new director, and this person kept telling us how much people just loved working with them, right? So we're their senior team. We're trying to get to know them and build our relationship. And they just kept bringing this up over and over and over again. And I was like, okay, sure. What I know is good leaders don't have to tell you, they just show you. And it became very prevalent very quickly. This director was not a great fit, and it didn't end up working out pretty quickly. But I'm like, if a leader, if someone is trying to tell me how great they are, that to me is a total red flag that there may be some manipulation that goes on there. It may not be a healthy situation because there's something about that where that person has an insecurity. So they're trying to overcompensate to get you to see like, no, I am great. I am wonderful. That's really where bragging sits into play. Good leaders simply are good leaders. They just show up that way. They don't need to tell you how much people like working with them. You will very quickly learn how much you like working with them. I also had an experience where I was working with a new leader that had joined our org. I think they were a VP. Maybe they were an SVP. I don't remember, to be honest. And they had very high emotional intelligence. You could tell from the beginning they talked a little bit about their past, but they were curious about the team, about what's working, about what's not, about what's annoying, what's taking time that they think it shouldn't. And they really listened. They weren't judging. They weren't trying to change things and bring in their own agenda and do it their way. And as we were meeting with this leader, you could tell they really didn't want to talk about them because they wanted to get to know us and our situation. But another red flag I see in unhealthy work environments are leaders that want to get to know you at a personal level without having that core foundational relationship already established. Now, don't get me wrong. I love my work wives. Some of my best friends to this day have come from work, and they know all the ins and outs of me as a human being and so much about my personal relationship. But just like relationships outside of work, it takes time, right? I have found this as a big red flag of a harsh work environment when someone really wants to know all the nitty-gritty personal details about you right from the beginning without having that trust and that experience. So again, I worked with a leader that came in and really wanted to get to know all the ins and outs and was definitely oversharing a lot of things about them. But what I wasn't okay with was when this leader started to use that personal information to try to manipulate people into doing things. So for example, quick interruption. If what you learn on this podcast is helpful, this is just the beginning. Your next step is to go and schedule a coffee chat, and we're going to dive into your specific situation. You'll leave knowing a few things you can try right away to get unstuck. And no, this is not a sales call. My goal is to help however I can. If I think coaching can help, I will tell you about it, but I'm currently on a wait list for new clients. Click the link in the show notes or go to lindsaylymancoaching.com/chat and get on my calendar. I only offer a few of these a week, and it's first come, first serve. All right, back to the podcast. There was a big, huge project that came up that they needed someone to lead, and it was a pretty big deal, and it was going to take a lot of work outside of the working scope people were already doing. So that meant a lot of nights and weekends. And it was also with a pretty senior, high-level executive that didn't have the greatest reputation of someone to work with. And this leader came to me and was basically trying to sell me on taking the lead of this project. And they started to use things. Again, this was a new leader. But they knew that I was a single working parent. And this person was like, as a single parent, you may not get a lot of opportunities for this. This is a good chance for you to get some executive presence and a great opportunity to advance your career. And I just was like, yeah, no, you don't get to pull in my personal life and try to manipulate me into feeling guilty and convincing me that this is the right opportunity. Just for me, that's a sign of an abusive relationship. So to me, red flags are leaders that want to try to get to know you personally at a level that's deeper than what your relationship already is. Yeah, we're going to talk high level who we are as humans, but when they're trying to take it deep, for me personally, that's not a great thing. The other red flag I've seen in leaders is when they join the team and they don't necessarily have other people that want to come and work with them. Now, on the flip side, good leaders develop people and help them become leaders, and you won't always like keep working with them, right? But I think it is definitely a red flag when leaders don't have people that, again, want to come and work for them, or that you're hearing, oh my gosh, they're so great, you're going to love working with them. When I was at Amazon, it's an environment where it's encouraged to rotate every handful of years. And so you would find these leaders that would come, and there would be a handful of people that would eventually trickle in and follow them, because when you find good people, you want to work together, and good people attract good people. And it is fun to work together because you know each other's leadership styles and you know how to work and you have those existing relationships. So it's definitely a red flag when there aren't people that are choosing to come and follow this leader. To me, is a red flag that this may not be a great environment. Okay. The other thing I do is to kind of look for and suss out the situation of the environment is when you're interviewing for a job or looking for a new team to work with, they're going to ask you a handful of situational questions. Tell me a time when. I want to do the same in return. Because here's the thing. If you ask a dumb question, you're going to get a dumb answer. So for me, I'm always trying to really dig into and get examples of how are people held accountable on this team? And if I simply just ask that, how do you hold your leaders accountable? I'm going to get some fluffy, dumb answer of like, oh, we do QBRs and we check in and they do one-on-ones and this and this. And I'm like, okay. But I want to get to the nitty-gritty. So here's some of the questions I like to ask. I like to ask, tell me a time when the team disagreed with leadership and the leaders listened and made changes. Again, if they can't answer and don't know of a time and they've been working on that team for a while, that's maybe something you want to investigate and look into a little bit. Why are leaders not willing to listen and make changes? There could be a legitimate reason, okay? But if it never happens, that's a little odd to me. I might ask, how are senior leaders evaluated and held accountable for building strong teams? Again, this one, people can kind of BS their way through. You got to really dive and ask some good follow-up questions. But if they don't have mechanisms to actually hold people accountable, that may be a sign, right? It's bad behavior that's tolerated. Accountability is where we stop things from being tolerated. I kind of think there's always going to be bad behavior because we're humans and we have bad days. But there's difference when it's tolerated and when it's not. Another question I might ask, tell me about a time when you were struggling with someone at work and how were you told to deal with it and resolve it and what happened? I want to know what type of support and advice are the team and the leaders and HR and the company telling each other on how to work on that resolution. Because again, it's going to happen. Because here's the thing. I think accountability is the number one biggest problem we face in these harsh work environments. Leaders are optimizing to shareholders, not to humans, and it shows. I sat in a meeting at Amazon that made me physically ill and shaken. I can't legally talk about it. And I left the company soon thereafter for lots of reasons, mainly because I wanted to come and do my own thing here, run my own coaching business. But after that meeting, it was very clear to me there was a lack of accountability and my growth opportunities there had maxed out. The company had data to support it, but there was no accountability. It was accepted. It was tolerated. I said, okay, good to know. Not the type of environment I wanted to continue to work in. Do I think Amazon's terrible and horrible? No. Are there some hard things? Yeah. Do I think you're going to find that at most companies? Yeah. It was great. I had a great experience. I have a lot of really good things to say about my experience working at Amazon. And I think there are a lot of great opportunities out there. But I also think there's pockets that are really challenging and hard and some things that we could do better to hold each other accountable to. I don't think people are malicious. I think they don't know what to do. I think they're scared of getting in trouble. I think they're tired and burnt out. Or I think in some cases, when it doesn't impact them directly, it's easy for them to kind of push it off and the cycle continues. So if you're in an environment or trying to evaluate an environment, look around. Do you see more than one person you can relate to? If there's just one person, they're trying to tick a box. Does this company make a point of being self-critical, and are they willing to make changes and implement them with an element of test and learn? Or in order for the change to go through, do you have to prove every single tiny step along the way? I see this so much. A lot of my clients work in big tech companies, and they are agile and they are willing to change. But when a change comes often from the bottom up, the amount of scrutiny and work required shows the people above aren't actually comfortable making the change unless it's their idea. You got to be willing to have an element of test and learn in there. Ask about a time a company missed a big goal and leaders were not pleased. What happened? But here's the thing. I don't actually care what happened in the moment. We as humans know how to respond in the moment for the most part. I want to know what happened for the 6 months after that. Did it get brought up again? Was the person penalized for it in their review? Was trust lost? Did leaders cut them off and no longer give them opportunities to grow and learn? Like, I don't want to know how did we just resolve the thing in the moment. I want to know after the fact, who were they? What type of environment is this? Ask about a time a key person left the company. How is it communicated? How are the gaps filled? Who was asked to pick up the extra work? How long were they asked to pick up that work? Were they given any sort of compensation? Were they given any sort of recognition and appreciation? Ask about a core business practice they've evaluated the effectiveness of in the last 6 months. Ask about a time they felt like they couldn't say no to a request that was outside of their working hours or outside of their scope of work. Again, I'm not just wanting to see what happens like in the heat of the moment. I want to know long term, how did they show up and how did the people around them show up? How are things held accountable? How are we learning and moving forward and not staying in the drama and holding grudges and cutting people off because they humaned along the way? Hard things have and will happen at every company. We're not trying to find this like magical work environment where it's fun and easy and it all just works out. No, we're trying to find an environment where when things are hard, because they will be, and there is conflict and there is bad behavior, how is it treated? How is it taken care of? How is it held accountable? How is it tried to be rectified? Or is it just justified and tolerated? That's what we're trying to get to. Okay, like I said, what's toxic to one person may not necessarily be toxic to another person. So it's important that you know what is your threshold. That's what we're going to dive into next week. So make sure you're subscribed. If you have questions or you feel like you're in this type of environment, you guys sign up for a coffee chat. There's zero commitment. This is just you and me talking it out, trying to help give you some ideas as if I'm your mentor. That's it. Go click the link in the show notes, lindsaylymancoaching.com/chat. Get on my calendar. Let's help get you out of this hard work environment where there's a lack of accountability. All right, y'all. You're amazing. You got this. We'll talk soon. Hey, you didn't schedule a coffee chat yet. Remember, that's the next step. There's so much more I can help you with. You're going to leave this coffee chat knowing a few things you can try right now, depending on your specific situation. This is not a sales call. My goal is simply to help however I can. If I do think coaching can help, I can tell you about it, but I'm currently on a wait list for new clients. Click the link in the show notes or go to lindsaylymancoaching.com/chat to get on my calendar. I only offer a few coffee chats a week and it's first come, first serve, so don't wait. Chat with you soon.